I was working at a big company, first a bank, and then the phone company, and I was surrounded by Dilberts. People who looked like Dilbert, they dressed like Dilbert, they acted like Dilbert, and he started as a doodle. I would draw him for presentations, and I would draw him on my little whiteboard in my cubicle. And one day I bought a book on how to become a cartoonist and sent off some samples to the big cartoon syndicates. And United Media called me back and said, "How would you like to be a syndicated cartoonist?" The first time that anybody saw Dilbert was in a newspaper, and I still had to work my day job at Pacific Bell, and I'd go to work every day, and I'd do the cartoon at night or before work, and it took about 6 years before it really took off, and I could finally leave my day job behind. Dilbert is your quintessential engineer. He cares about things more than he cares about people. He likes solving problems. He has no social life to speak of, and probably never will. But he's nice.
My troop leader said people are nice if you give them a chance. She said I would learn from this experience.
He's a little bit of a victim, because people dump on you if you have that kind of a personality. He's not very aggressive, but ultimately he's optimistic.
First, your generation pollutes the world and plunders its natural resources. Now this.
Okay, just calm down. I'll buy a box.
That'll be $80.
The turning point for turning Dilbert into a TV show, when it went from just a bunch of ideas that lots of people had to the real thing, was when I met Larry Charles. Larry had a great resume. He'd been one of the original writers on Seinfeld, and he'd worked on Mad About You, and we met. And the first time I saw him, if you can imagine a guy who looked like basically Jesus Christ in pajamas. He wore pajamas everywhere, all day long he wore pajamas. And when he visited me, he flew in pajamas, and that seemed normal to him. And I thought, God, I got to work with this guy.
Is everything simply a manifestation of consciousness? Or is there another actual level of existence?
When I read the books, I realized there was like a whole philosophy of life behind it that was very, very dense and complex. And I totally responded to that. It was very Kafkaesque, very Chaplin-esque, like modern times. It had a lot of black comedy. It was very much about the man against the machine, the logical man in the illogical world.
As you can see, our daycare facilities are second to none.
Oh. You can't put babies to work on an assembly line?
These are not babies. They're toddlers.
Oh. You're coming home with me.
I didn't know you wanted children, Alice.
I didn't until this moment.
How about now?
Hi. Must be
Scott's visual style that sort of dictates the look of the show. There's a thing called a model pack that goes out to the animators. That gives the exact dimensions and proportions of all the main characters. That has to be sort of followed very carefully.
The animations would come in, I would look at them, offer my input, and I'd make sure everything was on model. There are a lot of things that are not obvious in terms of what's going to be a problem when you bring a comic strip to TV. One of them is that my characters, some of them had no mouths. So Dilbert had no mouth, he had no eyeballs. Dogbert had no mouth. We had long meetings about what should the mouth look like, and we finally hit this compromise because we didn't want to change the characters too much. And the compromise was that you only see their mouth when they're talking. So it appears while the words are coming out and then it disappears again. And that seemed to work.
Good, that's it.
Come on, Wally, dance with us.
I don't hold hands. I'm only in it for fashion reasons.
The first person who says anything about a bad hair day goes right in the hole.
The hardest part about making a TV show from a cartoon is everybody has a different voice in their head. Every reader hears a different voice when they read the comic strip. And so we had to find voices that not only worked for us, but they were talented actors and actresses And they would sound pretty much like what we guessed people were hearing in their heads.
We held casting sessions, and we just kept on listening and hoping. That's one of the variables. You hope that somebody just clicks. Like, boom, that's him.
I always had a voice for Dilbert in my head that was kind of my own voice, but the problem was it's the voice the way I hear myself. If I record myself and then listen to it, doesn't sound anything like what I imagined Dilbert to sound like. So I couldn't even do an impression of myself to someone else to say, make it sound like this.
This is crazy. People are tired, weary, bored, and depressed after a hard day's work, day in, day out, year after year, an endless dead-end job after endless dead-end job with no future and no hope. That's natural. It's completely appropriate to feel that way. How else should you feel?
We listened to so many people read for Dilbert that I was starting to give up hope. People would come in, professional actors, and we'd say, you know, that was good, but can you read it a little more sympathetically or a little more something? And they would read it just the same way a second time. Daniel Stern came in, and the first time he did it, we thought, wow, that was really close. And we asked him if he could do it another way. And he could do it with 5 different nuances. And all we'd have to do is ask, and he could change it. And we thought, wow, that is some serious talent. And he sounded exactly like what we were looking for, and he was just perfect. The casting for Dogbert's voice was probably the hardest, because you got to get a voice that's male, but it looks like it comes out of a small, egg-shaped, fuzzy creature.
I thought you were going to wake me at 6:30.
I also said women like men who are shaped like potatoes. Can you find the pattern here?
You wanted him to be kind of sarcastic, so that everything he said had a little bit of a, I'm yanking your chain. He needed to be aggressive sometimes, so there were a lot of qualities that you had to get into a small package. Dogbert was actually the first character developed after Dilbert when I was doing the comic strip. And it was just so Dilbert would have someone to talk to. Dilbert didn't seem like he'd have a lot of friends, so he needed a dog. But I didn't want an ordinary dog. I wanted a dog who, you know, was very undog-like. Not only does he not want to be your best friend and bring you slippers, but he might want to conquer the planet and make all the people his domestic servants.
Now dance for your diplomat. Dance. Now river dance.
How did you become the diplomat to Albonia?
I was the only one who applied for the job. This isn't exactly Monaco.
He's pretty self-absorbed and pretty much feels that he's superior to everyone else around him. So obviously I was a natural choice for the job.
Here, give me that microphone. Worship me. Put bras on your head and chant Dogbert is king while slapping yourself in the face with a slab of raw liver.
If you're actually sitting in a meeting with Chris, he has kind of I don't mean to say this in an insulting way, but it's not a manly kind of voice. And it just sounded like it might come out of a small creature, so he was perfect.
I think that Dilbert and Dogbert is probably to me, the most interesting and complex relationship, because it is also a shadow relationship, an alter ego relationship. One permits the other to be who they are.
Scott actually, I think, wanted to play Dogbert at one point, or thought perhaps he would when he wasn't finding somebody. And I think he has a similar sensibility to the character.
He kind of channels all of my own worst instincts. He gets to say the things that I'd like to say, but I'm afraid of retribution. But a small dog can say those things and get away with it.
They say only the good die young. If it works the other way, too, I'm immortal.
Speaking of evil, I could use your special talents tomorrow.
Well, let me check my calendar. I'll see what else I have going. Evil, 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 not evil. Looks like I have an opening.
Some people before me had done a lot of barking and growling, and I guess I was the first guy who just talked. And because I just can't do voices or characters, which I found out painfully after one season on Saturday Night Live. And especially I can't bark. So I think Scott, responded just to the normalcy of my approach to the dog.
As you probably know, all the good product names have been trademarked by companies who are competent.
Competent? How are we going to compete with that?
We wanted a voice for Wally that didn't sound really manly, as many of the characters are not, but was male, and sounded a little bit lazy, a little bit shiftless, like he was just trying to get by, just trying to survive the day and not be noticed.
When a voice hit us, we went with it, even whether it was a star like Daniel Stern or Gordon Hunt, who's a director and whose voice just kind of was rattling around in my head when I thought about Wally. And we auditioned a number of people, and I said, we've got to bring Gordon Hunt in here. He is Wally.
All these great character actors were there auditioning. I thought, what the hell am I doing here? But I think there was a certain nasality that he thought would suit this guy, so that was my audition.
I don't hold hands. I'm only in it for fashion reasons.
Wally was based on somebody I worked with. He was a guy who had been told his career was over because he'd made a bad mistake, but they weren't going to fire him. So he could live out the rest of his days without being fired, but never being promoted and never getting a raise. And he used his fairly significant intellect to become the laziest employee who ever worked at Pacific Bell.
Most of my interaction has to do with Dilbert and with Alice. And I'm constantly coming in and just dropping the most stupid or slightly unpleasant thing that one can say in a room, and sometimes getting smacked in the face by Alice for doing it.
Alice, could you clean up the coffee spill? Our intern has suddenly discovered dignity.
Sure. No problem. I don't mind.
See? She doesn't have a...
There you go. She's Pyramid Head. She's got pyramid hair, not unlike my own. And she's in an office setting just trying to keep it all together. I think she is the bastion of sanity. That's how I play her, with my voice.
The Alice character was based on somebody that I worked with at Pacific Bell. It was a woman who was the only woman in a group of male engineers. And she was most famous for, at least in my mind, most famous for making two grown men cry at meetings.
String him up. Hang Dogbert. Get a rope.
Back down! None of us ate it. It was like this when we got here.
How do we know it wasn't you, Alice?
I can prove it! Look here.
Kathy Griffin was my first choice for Alice before we even talked to her. And somehow you imagine that your first choice is not going to be available or doesn't want to do the job. So somehow I had held that as my ideal voice, and we're actually looking for people who sounded like her. And then it turns out she was willing to do it, so it was perfect.
I'm not really one of the pros. I mean, there are people that on Dilbert that are frighteningly talented, that can sound like, you know, any age and any ethnicity and male or female or baby, and I'm really impressed with that.
What the heck is going on here? Where did all this delicious smelling packing material come from?
Don't you know?
Dilbert, I don't think I'm in the habit of asking questions to which I know the answers, am I?
It's a lot of fun to play the boss because he's a guy on the surface who's a pretty big knucklehead, really out of it. But as Larry, Charles, and I have talked about, that he could be, it's the old crazy like a fox.
The Pointy-Haired boss intentionally has no name so that anybody who looks at him can read their own boss into him. And he's kind of a composite of all the worst bosses I've ever had and the worst ones I've ever heard of.
I appreciate your heartfelt sentiments. And with that in mind, I'm decreasing your pay, cutting your benefits, and increasing your hours. Everybody back to work.
That's exactly
Larry
my
Miller
point.
managed to play this voice that sounded like somebody who was kind of self-important, but completely clueless. And he could get those two qualities. I mean, that's the sign of great acting, is that they can convey not one quality, but two qualities simultaneously, and he could do that great.
Sometimes, depending on how close you get to the part, I like to come in, I don't know how other people do it, but I come in and say, look, there are 11 ways to do anything. Here's one of them.
It's the means.
Here's a bit of bombast. Here's a way this guy could be funny, I
You
think.
know, son, this is so hard for me to say. Actually, it's not. You're fired. Clean out your desk and leave.
But I... But...
Catbert was originally just a regular cat that I introduced in the strip, and he was just going to be there for 2 days and then gone. And I got hundreds of emails from people who said, "We love Catbert, bring back Catbert." Now the interesting thing was, he didn't have a name, but everybody said, "Bring back Catbert." And, you know, I'm no genius, but I figured if hundreds of people simultaneously name a character, you ought to bring him back.
Mr. Catbert, Director of Human Resources. What brings you out of your lair?
I understand you've been praising Todd.
You could say that.
His personnel folder is curiously empty. No photo, no work history. Very, very suspicious.
Todd works in mysterious ways.
He won't work at all if his file doesn't turn up soon. You see, I don't believe in Todd.
You take that back.
There is no Todd. Todd exists only in your minds. Where's your Todd now?
We're screwed.
The hardest part about making a TV animated cartoon is the time lag. You know, the script looks okay, but when the actors read it, you haven't necessarily written to what they can do best. And then when it comes back from animation, you know, months later when it's fully animated, you don't really know if it worked until you see it.
The thing that's been most shocking to me is how old-fashioned this whole process still is. It still boils down to people recording their voices. It still boils down to somebody sitting in front of a blank piece of paper and drawing a picture. The technology has not come that far.
Before I started cartooning, I was going to work every day, and I'd just sit there and I'd feel the life force being drained out of my body. You know, I felt like I was in some kind of demonic UFO torture chamber or something. I think the best writing is something that comes out of your own experience. So I was uniquely qualified to write about an engineer in a cubicle.
There's always people in here. I started off being a cartoonist. I used to draw caricatures in grade school. I was the school cartoonist in my school newspapers. This gave me an opportunity to sort of tap into that side of myself. Where the sitcom, it's like it's done, you gotta make the best of it, you have to edit into something and send it out to the satellites. Here, I have the ability to continue to rewrite it and re-record it and reanimate it up until the very last minute.
What if during the shadows, that's the only time you went to the light color? There is nothing more frightening than seeing something that you've been involved with on television for the first time. Because you're sitting there and you're thinking, man, if this is bad, how many millions of people are watching it right now? But I think after we got a few episodes under our belt, we were firing on all cylinders.
I must be dead. This is the tunnel I keep reading about. Behind this door are the answers to the ultimate questions, the afterlife. Frankly, I was hoping for more.